Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. This is Bernard with Explore As We Go. For the past year and a half, I was fortunate enough to shelter myself from the pandemic in the beautiful Islands of Gods in Bali with my partner Weedy. On July 2nd, our luck ran out, and we made the conscious decision to go home and get our vaccines as well as spend more time with our family. Traveling during this COVID era is definitely not easy, given all the constant changes to border restrictions, quarantine, and COVID test requirements. Which is why I'm putting together this video today about my experience entering Singapore, and it can hopefully shed some light to you if you have future plans entering this country. So in today's 3-part series video, I'm going to share with you how is it like entering Singapore during the pandemic, what is it like going through 14 days of quarantine in complete isolation, and also the last video answering your most frequently asked questions about anything related to entering the country right now. Before we start, make sure to give us a thumbs up via the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell notifications so you won't miss our next video uploads. So before you buy your ticket entering Singapore, you first need to find out if you are eligible to enter the country. At this point in time, Singapore is slowly easing up its borders restrictions, only allowing a select few countries to enter for short-term visit, but with specific COVID precautionary measures. To find out who can enter the country, let's go through this simple flowchart we put together in this video. Disclaimer: this information is accurate as of August 21st, 2021. Do note that the government can change these restrictions overnight, so make sure to check the Singapore immigration website before making any travel plans. So let's begin. Who can enter Singapore? To start, all Singapore citizens and permanent residents can enter Singapore at any time from any country. However, the length of quarantine will depend on where the traveler has stayed in the last 21 days in which he or she is departing from. The government has divided these into 4 different categories. Starting from Category 1, if you're departing from Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, mainland China excluding Jiangsu province, and New Zealand, there is no need to do any quarantine. All you require is to take a COVID PCR test upon arrival and self-isolate within 48 hours until a negative test result is shown. For Category 2, travelers returning from Australia, Brunei, Canada, Germany, mainland China in the Jiangsu province will have to take a COVID PCR test upon arrival and serve a 7-night stay-home notice at a Singapore dedicated facility, which is a government-assigned hotel, or self-sourced hotels or service apartments. At Category 3, Australia, Belgium, Denmark, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, Norway, Republic of Korea, and Switzerland will need to take a PCR COVID test 72 hours prior to the flight departure, take a COVID PCR test upon arrival, and pay $2,000 serving a 14-night quarantine, and also take the antigen test on day 3, 7, and 11 during the quarantine. Finally, at the day 15, which is the stay of the 14th night, we'll have to take another COVID PCR test and needs to show that it's negative. Or if any of these travelers from these countries are fully vaccinated, they can serve their 14-day quarantine in isolation at their own residence or the self-select hotel or service apartments. Only 2 full doses of the Pfizer or Moderna mRNA vaccines that is completed 2 weeks before arrival is considered fully vaccinated. Category 4 is basically all other countries, and it's pretty much the same as Category 3, but there is no option to do a quarantine at your own residence or your self-appointed hotels, regardless of your vaccination status or not. And there's a special category which is 4A, which are travelers from Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, Sri Lanka, have to take an additional COVID antigen test in addition to the COVID PCR test upon arrival. Singapore also allowed entry for immediate family members of Singapore citizens and permanent residents, as well as student pass holders and work pass holders. These travelers can enter the country upon successful application and approval from the Singapore Immigration Office. Once approved, these travelers can enter the country based on the quarantine requirements as seen as the previous chart. Next on the list, Singapore has special plans for short-term business travelers, divided into two categories based on if you're entering the country with controlled itinerary or a non-controlled itinerary. For non-controlled itinerary, there is an air travel pass which only allow travelers from the following countries: Hong Kong, Macau, mainland China excluding the Jiangsu province, New Zealand, and Taiwan. For business travelers entering the country with a controlled itinerary, can enter through the Reciprocal green lane only for countries from Brunei and the Jiangsu province from mainland China. Last but not least, if you are a short-term visitor planning to enter the country as a tourist or just doing some social visits, Singapore only allows a restricted amount of countries with certain criteria. The following countries that are allowed into Singapore are Brunei, Germany, Hong Kong, Macau, mainland China excluding the Jiangsu province, New Zealand, and Taiwan. Do note that these countries also have to follow the quarantine restrictions based on the chart for reference as shown previously. In hopes of gradually opening up its borders, the Singapore government has recently launched a new program to pilot from September 1st, allowing vaccinated tourists from specific countries entering Singapore with little to no quarantine. Currently, there are only two countries participating are Brunei and Germany. And if successful, we could potentially see more travel bubbles like these happening with more other countries. Despite the positive outlook, there are plenty of restrictions and rules to qualify for this visa. Travelers must purchase dedicated flights, show proof of vaccination, purchase COVID insurance covering up to $30,000 in hospitalization bills, participate in strict contact tracing programs, as well as take multiple PCR COVID tests upon entering the country. You can check the link down here where you can see which country you're arriving from, how many days quarantine are you required to complete before you can enter the country. I was really lucky because just a week before I booked my flight, Singapore had this thing called a 21-day quarantine mandatory. Because of the Delta variant for coronavirus, the government was putting in extra precaution to quarantine people longer. Honestly, if I were to quarantine 21 days, I really don't know what I would be able to do because this 14 days has been challenging enough. So now if you know you're legally able to enter the country, the second thing is to find out where you're going to figure out your quarantine space is going to be. For most cases, the government usually assign you a stay-home dedicated facility, which is usually a hotel or even a space of residence. But if you want to do your own quarantine space, you actually have to submit a request or appeal form, and that space has to be only you and the person arriving when traveling only. Once you get your ticket, the transit process is quite cumbersome, but I'm going to try my best to put down a list of stuff so that you know what you need to prepare at least 72 hours before your flight. For the very first thing, you definitely need your COVID PCR test, and you need the test to be negative with the results 72 hours before your flight. Thankfully for us, I was staying in Jakarta, and there were a lot of testing booths that are drive-through that's really convenient, and the test comes out in 10 to 16 hours, which I did 48 hours before my flight. Once you have your negative COVID test, you have to log into this government website, which is the Singapore Immigration Board. There will be a list of checklists for things that you will need to prepare before you enter the country. Number one, you have to fill in this immigration arrival card 3 days before your arrival. It's very simple. All of the things are all online. All you just need to do is fill up the online form and submit it, and make sure you print it just in case when you arrive, you get a copy to show the immigration officer. The second thing is downloading the Trace Together app, as well as the Homer app and a Health Hub app. I will try to list them down in the links below so you can download them in advance. The third and final thing is pay in advance for your PCR test upon arrival, which you will require to do after you arrive in the airport in Singapore. So now, here is my experience when I departed from Jakarta, entering Singapore Changi Airport on July 2nd at 10 p.m. It was a really short flight. It was only an hour and a half flight from Jakarta to Singapore. I flew Singapore Airlines. It was really comfortable. My flight was almost 80% full, but most of the passengers in the flight were all transiting passengers. And by the time I walked out of the aircraft, there were at least 4 to 5 security guards in full PPE asking me the same question, like, what flight are you on? What's your full name? I need to see your boarding pass. And it was just a bombardment of like things coming in. And before I know it, I was put on the Travelator, and I was going through like 4 to 5 different like screening stations where they take my temperature. And it was just so surreal because when I entered the airport, it didn't feel like an airport. It felt like a hospital because all the hospital staff were wearing full PPE with masks and face shield on, with like surgical gowns and everything. And everyone was just like manic. Everyone's busy because like a flight just arrived, and it was just so crazy. Out of the whole like aircraft, there were only 3 passengers that were entering Singapore, and the rest were all transiting passengers. The 3 of us made our way to the immigration custom officer, where we are supposed to show our passport and check in and everything. There was another process where they rally us to the corner and asking us for documentations, paperwork. So make sure like all the lists, the checklist that I mentioned earlier, make sure you print out your documents so that when you arrive, you don't need to panic and look it up on your email or your phone. You can just flash the printed copy of the immigration card to the officer, and then they can direct you straight away to clear customs and go and get your baggage. When I cleared customs, it was pretty seamless. There was a delay of our baggage arriving at the belt, so I waited about 30 to 40 minutes just not knowing what to expect, and I can't really go anywhere because they sealed the entire airport away. There was only one walkway and one path of like where you can go, so I can't even go to the bathroom. So if you get a chance to use the bathroom before you arrive at the airport, make sure you use the bathroom, because arriving into the airport, it's not going to be your typical airport arrival experience. It's just going to be a very streamlined, like set in foot path where you have to just follow instructions and get your things done. So after collecting my baggage, I was rallied away to do my COVID test, which is the PCR test. Thankfully, I already paid in advance, so all I needed to do was once again take out my printed documents, show the officer, and I was brought into a separate tent that they built, this like crazy quarantine facility tent right outside the airport. Before I know it, I had a swab in my nose, and they told me that's it. I can grab my bags and go to the next station, which is the pickup station for my hotel transportation. And when I arrived in the transportation, I was the last one out of the 3 of us. It was like a small bus. Not much instructions were given to us. The hotel experience was just a complete lottery. I've been trying to analyze what kind of hotels they might assign us to based on flights, based on time of arrival, and what country you're coming from. When we finally arrived in Tanglin, which is in Orchard area, we arrived at the Orchard Hotel by the Millennium Group. The hotel wasn't exactly a 5-star hotel, and by the time we got there, it was already almost midnight, and I was just exhausted because the process was just non-stop and there was no break in between. Check-in was pretty, painless, but there was only one check-in staff that late at night, and there were 3 of us. We were all checked in one by one with a set-up lobby, kind of like open-air lobby outside. We were asked to pay up front. One thing I would like to note is that if you get a chance, make sure you tell the hotel that you want to pay upon checkout, because bear with me, I'm going to share my experience later about this and the reason why. Upon checking in, I was assigned to my room. It was small. I had like a tiny window, and it was dark. It felt like a bird cage. But at that point in time, I was just so exhausted. I was just ready to unpack my suitcase and just take a shower and feel clean and just go to bed. Alright everyone, this brings us to the end of our video. So if given a chance to enter Singapore, but you still have to go through all of these travel restrictions and quarantine, would you still do it? Let us know down in the comments below. And stay tuned for our second video, which will share with you how a quarantine process is going to work out in Singapore.